Since the break-in, I've never been able to shake the feeling of being watched, but I always tried to ignore it. One night when Marcus and I snuck out, we were just taking a walk through the woods nearby, but I could have sworn I heard somebody following us. I looked back constantly to find nothing. We passed a few wild animals and they were all just running in the same direction, and we thought it was really weird, but we just joked about it. It wasn't until we saw a coyote run past us. We got uneasy and thought we could head back, especially since coyotes were running around. We headed back to our homes, walking at a slow pace. We heard a bunch of branches snap, and we broke into a run. We got back to my house and sat on the porch for a while. Marcus eventually calmed down and headed back to his place. I walked to the backyard and started to open the door when the hairs on my neck stood up. I turned around slowly to see the gate connecting to the streets behind. I saw nobody, but I couldn't help but feel like I was looking straight at them. I made a crazy face to try to scare anything away, but I knew nothing was there, so I just walked inside. I walked up my stairs and onto my room. I looked out my window, peering into the backyard. There I saw nothing but the trees and grasses blowing in the wind until I looked at the street behind the fence. I could see somebody who was passing by over and over as if they would turn back around when they hit the end of my street. I watched for a while until I got too tired to watch. I crawled into my bed and went to sleep. The next day, it was Valentine's Day. I was in 8th grade in my communications class at a project where we had to place 4 cards each with one compliment into someone's box. Although I found it a little dumb, I was still a little nervous, thinking nobody would put any cards in my box. I felt like I was back in kindergarten, stressed whether I would get a golden star in class or not. Although I wouldn't know what for, I'm not someone who would stick out. I am not special. After listening to my teacher's boring lecture, she eventually brought all of our boxes to us one by one. I saw girls excitedly holding back from grabbing everything from their box, whispering to each other who they wished a card from. Then I saw guys look at each other like they were too cool for this project. I rolled my eyes and I looked over at Marcus. "Are you excited?" he asked sarcastically. So excited. He leaned his head onto his hands. "You put something in my box?" "Yeah, it says suck my dick," I said. "Wow, never heard that before," he smiled. Miss Morlino approached us and placed a box on his desk and mine. He peeked inside. "I see candy," he said jokingly. I looked into my box through the thin cut on the lid. I couldn't really see anything. Bored, I looked out the window. The leaves were starting to turn brown, but it was still pretty warm out. When we got to look inside the boxes, I lifted my lid and looked inside to see only a few cards. I looked through each one, reading them. The one I got from Marcus read, "I had sex with your mom. It was amazing." I smiled. Another one read, "I like your lipstick. Black fits you." I'm glad someone likes my lipstick. I picked up the last card. It didn't have a name on it. It was to be expected that someone would forget to write their name on it. I looked at it for another second before I opened it, ripping the sticker holding it shut. The paper had lines that seemed to be cut from paper. I looked up these lines and they were all from the town's poem sections of the newspaper. It read, "Billy, your eyes are something I can't forget. I have watched from afar, through windows and doors. I need the touch of skin. I need your skin. I want you near. Lust cannot explain my obsession." I looked at it confused. They spelled my name wrong. This was so fucking weird, I just assumed it was a joke. He was like, who the fuck is taking the time to cut out newspaper clippings? I looked over at Marcus. "Did you write this?" I asked. I passed it to him. He looked at it making a sour face. "What? No," he laughed. "But what is this? A ransom note?" Miss Merlino must have seen us talking because she walked over to us. "Is everything okay?" she asked, squatting down between her desk. "Billy got something weird," Marcus said. He passed the note to her. She looked at me before reading the note. Her face sank. I felt a weight in my chest. "What?" I asked worriedly. She looked annoyed. She stood up, walking to the front of the class. "Who wrote this?" Miss Merlino asked sternly, holding it up to the class. I looked at all the faces in the class, all of them confused. "This is inappropriate, and you should all know better. Who wrote this?" she asked again. Nothing. She looked more worried. "Whoever did this, I hope you know this behavior is disgusting. This isn't funny. I trust you all should know this." She placed the card down on her desk. I felt the edge for the rest of the class. Marcus and I walked out together, admitting we both chose to throw away all our notes. I saved yours, of course, he said, smiling. Thanks. I knew my creativity would pay off. How about mine? Did you like my confession? He laughed. No, I think I'll have to tell my dad. His face sank. Please don't. I smiled at him. But really, did you write that note? I asked. No, you write it? You can be honest with me, I won't tell, he smiled. I promise I didn't write it. They didn't even pick out a news clipping to spell my name right. I think I know how to spell my name. Well, I'm not sure about that one. I pushed him before scuffing a little. During my last class, Miss Merlino called me down to her class. She asked me to stay after school. I didn't want to, but I figured it would be a good chance to do some schoolwork. Besides, my mom got out in an hour, so I wouldn't be there for too long. Eventually, when my mom came to pick me up, Miss Merlino and I met her outside. We walked through the hallway slowly. It was so quiet, it was strange seeing the hall so empty. Do you think I did it? No, I saw that card yesterday in your box, she said. Are you mad? No, I just think it was sick. No one should be pulling a prank like that. So you think it's just a prank? Yeah, she said, her voice was soft. When we got outside, my mom was leaning against the car. My mom told me to go to the car and I waited. They talked quietly, almost whispering. I tried my best to listen, but I only heard. Worried. Sick. Stalk. Again. Joke. I was confused, but I waited patiently. My mom walked over to the car, getting inside. Hey, you get any work done? She asked gently. Her hands were shaking. She was obviously stressed from it. Yeah. What were you guys talking about? Just a note. It's nothing to think about. I saw worry in her face, but I didn't understand. I heard him say it was a joke. Miss Merlino said it was a joke. I mean, I assumed it was. When we got home, my mom told me to go to my room. I heard my parents talking. I didn't want to overhear anything that might fuel my nervousness, so I put on some music and began to read for a while. But my mind just couldn't focus on the pages. I felt scared. I looked out the window into the darkness, but there was obviously nothing there. I lay down on my bed, thinking of every scary story I've ever heard. Ghosts, killers, clowns, monsters. My dad walked in, and I sat up quickly. Hey, sorry. Your mom told me something happened at school. You okay? He said, sitting down on the end of my bed. Yeah, is Mom okay? I asked. You know she gets anxious about this stuff, he said, exhaling a large breath. But it was just a joke. He glanced to the side. Yeah, well, you know your mom, she always takes it seriously, especially this. I guess. He put his hand on my shoulder. You sure you seemed a little on edge when I walked in? I'm sure, I'm good. I never liked admitting I was scared, but I should have. It would have saved me a lot. He looked at me and nodded. Okay, I trust you. You're much stronger than I ever was as a kid. He smiled and pushed the hair away from my face. We're not having dinner. I'm taking your mom out tonight, okay? All right, I smiled fakely. He nodded and walked downstairs, closing the door behind him. Not long after that, my dad took my mom out. I walked downstairs and made myself a sandwich when Marcus called me. We talked for a bit before he asked, "Want to go on a bike ride?" Not really. Dude, come on. I promise it'll be fun. I got something I want to show you. What? Can't tell you. It's a surprise. I don't know. Fine, I'll tell you when I get over there. And if you don't want to go still, then we'll just hang out at your house unless your mom's making Brussels sprouts. I'm not eating that shit. Okay, I'll see you in 20 then, I said. Great, see you soon. 20 minutes later, I saw him pull up, and I rushed into the garage, getting my bike. I opened the garage door and placed my bike helmet on my hip. What the fuck is that? Marcus said. My helmet? You still wear a fucking helmet? I looked at him annoyed. What may I get you for Valentine's Day? I asked smugly. Dude, I told you, she can't afford any gifts right now, dick, he said defensively. That bitch was fake. I rolled my eyes and put on my helmet. Did you get your fat ass on the bike? Ted told me about this old house. I want to see it. We rode our bikes for around 25 minutes before we saw the house. We slowed down a little, looking at each other. Both of us knew this was a bad idea, but we persisted. We left our bikes at some tree and walked up a short driveway. The house was old and covered in vines. It was pink, but the paint had faded in color significantly. Some of the windows were broken, and there were some dead plants around the house. It would be really cute if it wasn't so run down. We looked around, we found a window. It was broken. I offered we climb in through the window. but he strongly argued against it since it still had the glass on it. We tried the door. It was already half an inch open. We opened it slowly, it creaked loudly, echoing through the house. When we walked inside, we were hit with a stench of rotting meat. I tried to see what the cause was, but it was so dark it took us a minute to get adjusted to it. Marcus opened up the bag and pulled out his phone, flipping the flashlight on, and I did the same. "It smells like something died in here," he said, whipping his phone around trying to see if anything that might explain the smell, but there was nothing. No furniture, no graffiti, not even a single piece of cloth on the floor. Marcus and I looked around the whole floor, but the smell wasn't coming from down here. "Let's check upstairs," he said, looking up at the ceiling. "Are you sure it's safe?" "No." And before I could say anything, he ran up the stairs, stomping on every step. I laughed to myself before walking behind him. When I got to the top of the stairway, I noticed that the smell wasn't as strong. I looked around for a bit and noticed something weird. It was clean. The floor swept, candles were neatly set on the windowsill, and the walls had paintings hung up on the wall. Someone has been taking care of this house. What if it's not even abandoned? Why would I trust Marcus to even know the house was abandoned? I got a feeling of being watched. The hairs on my neck were standing up. I looked around and walked to the window, looking out and saw our bikes. The driveway was empty, nothing but bushes on the tree line. My nerves settled a little. I backed away from the window and sighed in relief. I walked into one of the bedrooms. The walls were blue and it had hardwood floors. I looked for anything else, but the only thing in the room was a single bookshelf. It was old, and there were multiple pieces of wood chipping on the floor around it. It was filled with books, all of them looked like 1,000,000 years old. I walked up to it, dragging my fingers along the spines of each book. I picked one out. It was some animal psychology book. I didn't look at it for too long, though. All the pages were faded except for a few at the end. I put it back and was looking over the other ones until Marcus called me to the other room. You're gonna want to see this." I walked into the room. It was fully furnished. The walls were painted light pink, fully furnished with furniture, paintings, and books. All looked nearly new. There was a table with chairs, a carpet, and a bed placed in the middle of the room. I sat on the bed. It was comfy, and the blankets felt new, not thin or dusty. I looked up at Marcus. "What?" I asked. "Come over here," he said, waving me closer. I walked to the chair next to him. "I found this." He passed me a book. "Okay." "Open it." I looked down and flipped through the pages. They were all scribbled on, just nonsense words, but it was every page. "Yeah, there's a whole stack of them," Marcus said. He smiled, sinking into the cushions. I looked at him. "I don't like this. We should leave." "I'm sure it's fine," Marcus said, brushing me off. I sighed. "I'm going downstairs." He nodded. Okie dokie. I walked back down the stairs and walked into the hallway that was behind the stairs. All the way at the far right of the hall was an old brown door. I walked to the door and listened. I didn't hear anything. I looked outside for signs of someone coming home before I opened the door slowly. The walls were full of cracks and at some points, small holes. I peeked through one and all I saw was the dark, dusky, hollow skeleton of the hallway's wall. I walked down the steps, each one letting out an uneasy creak. When I got down there, I noticed it was surprisingly nice. I took a second to take it in before the smell was definitely coming from here. I kept walking deeper into the room. I looked around. The walls and floor were completely finished. There was an old mattress, cans, and clothes. The cans smelled hard. It strangely gave me some ease knowing they were old. As ease was very sure it lived, though. I heard walking upstairs in the kitchen. I will admit, it startled me a bit. It came out of nowhere. I was about to yell for Marcus to come down when he called me. I picked up and held the phone to my ear. "There is someone inside," he whispered. My eyes widened. I looked at the stairs. I left the door wide open. There was nothing stopping them from getting to me. I couldn't speak. I don't know what to say. "Where are you?" he asked. I heard the floorboards above me starting to creak, knocking dust down from the ceiling onto my face. They were in the living room now. "The basement," I said, stuttering through my fear. "Can you hear where they are?" He sounded on the edge of tears. "I think they're in the living room." I could barely hold my phone now. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to hold my phone with both hands. "Do you think you can get out of the house?" "No, I can't. They're too close to the basement." I heard Marcus take a deep breath. I'm gonna run downstairs to you. Hang up the phone and I'll run, okay? No, just leave me. No, hang out when you need me to run to you. I was paralyzed, but I knew I couldn't afford to be. I forced myself to focus. Okay. I waited a few seconds before I hung up the phone and closed my eyes. I heard a pair of footsteps running, then I heard another pair slowly follow. I heard Marcus fly down the stairs and run into the basement, slamming and locking the door behind him. He jumped down the stairs. Did he follow you? I asked. He looked at me terrified, eyes wide open. I saw him. I saw his face. There was something wrong with him. He was covered in blood. I think it had to be. There was so much. He said, stuttering. Is there a way to get out of here? I don't know. We heard the front door slam shut and footsteps slowly walking around. It sounded like they were dragging something heavy along the floor. I could see that Marcus was red in the face. All of a sudden, I heard the basement door slam. It sounded like they were throwing their whole body weight against it. I could feel my heart in my throat. I couldn't breathe. I dropped my phone and put my hands in my hair, shaking. I looked around desperate to find some way to get out. Why didn't you just leave? I yelled. I couldn't leave you, he said, shaking. Now we're both going to fucking die, I said. I'm sorry, he yelled. I looked up at the ceiling and bang, he continued. We were going to die. This man is going to kill us. I feel so stupid. Why? Why did I come here? I looked at Marcus and I was sure this was the last time I'd seen him. Marcus, when we were 6, I was the one who stole your dad's lucky socks, I said, my breath shaking. You bitch, Marcus said, almost crying. He put his head against the wall behind him. Mia isn't real. I made her up, he said as if it were some hidden secret. I know. Oh, come on, he said. I put my hands in my face. I balled myself up and started to cry. I was going to die. I was sure of it. I wanted to do so much and all of those plans were gone. Turned to nothing in a matter of seconds. The banging was getting worse. Marcus tugged at my shoulder. Billy, a window. He pointed to the bathroom. The door was slightly open, but I could barely see a sliver of light coming through. We both stood up and ran into the bathroom, pushing a shelf of towels aside violently. We climbed up and tried to get the window open, but it wouldn't budge. I pulled on a lever as hard as we could, but we just couldn't get it open. I heard the banging on the door get louder. It sounded like they were putting a hole in the wall. It started to scream, a raspy, dry scream, like when you try to talk after exhaling all the air in your lungs. Marcus looked out the window. He pulled his arm back and punched it, but nothing. He hit it again, and again his knuckle was bruised before the first crack. The door slammed open. Marcus, fuck, I know. He punched the glass again, tears welled up in his eyes. He closed his eyes in pain. He punched harder and harder until he punched through, cutting his hand so badly I could barely see the skin under his blood. He took a towel and knocked the rest of the glass off. I pushed him through the window. He put his hand out trying to help me up, and I told him to just run. I climbed through as fast as I could, digging my fingers into the nearby dirt to claw myself out. I stood up and whipped around. They must have just missed my ankle because their hand was outstretched from the window, clawing at the ground. I could hear their shaky frustration breathing. It was covered in wet blood. I watched in horror as what I assumed was a man's hand dragged back inside the basement, their fingertips scraping against the concrete, leaving a trail of blood and skin behind. Marcus yelled at me, mounting his bike. Let's fucking go. I ran to my bike and we rode to my house as fast as we possibly could. The 25-minute ride felt like an hour. I constantly looked behind me, but he or it didn't follow. When we finally made it back to my house, I left my bike on the front lawn and ran up to my room. I locked the windows and closed all the curtains. Go wash your hands off, I'll get you some bandages, I said, rushing him to the restroom. You sure? I don't want to get blood all over your towel. Marcus, look at your hand, you need to wash it. I rushed downstairs and saw my parents pull up in the driveway. I grabbed the first aid kit and ran up to my bathroom. Marcus was sitting on the floor, his arm wrapped in a towel. I bent down on my knees. He unwrapped his hand. His entire hand was covered in cuts and bruises. They were all such deep cuts, and the bleeding didn't seem to slow down for a bit. Marcus, this is really bad. We should go to the hospital. I've had worse. He smiled at me. I scuffed at him a little before wrapping his arm. I threw my towel into my laundry basket. I heard my parents walk in. I pushed Marcus into my bedroom. I was so fucking crazy, Marcus laughed, before throwing himself on the bed. Ow, He groaned, grabbing his hand. I was so scared, I almost shit my pants, he smiled. I sat at the edge of my bed shaking. What's wrong? It was just some homeless drug addict. It's nothing to worry about. We got out and my arm will be fine. It's just some cuts. What about the blood? He was covered in it. Probably just a cat or deer. People are crazy. He brushed it off. I wanted to think nothing of it, but all I could think of was them dragging their hand against the cement. Nobody does that. I've never even heard of a drug addict behaving like that. Yeah, you're right. He looked at me skeptically, rightfully so. So where'd you put my dad's lucky socks? I gave them back to your mom, he nodded. I'm gonna call you when I get home again, right? He smiled. Yeah, let me know if your mom wants to take you to the hospital. We'll see, he laughed. I walked him downstairs and opened the door while he put his shoes on. Bye, Marcus, have a good night, my mom yelled from the living room. Don't worry, I will, he said before winking at me with a malicious smile. I smiled before pushing him out the door. Call you later. Yes, sir, he said. My mom asked what we did. All I said was that we watched a movie and then hung out in my room. Cleaning. She nodded. Well, I hope you guys had fun. Yeah, we did. My dad gave me a look. I'm watching you, he said, laughing. My mom hit his shoulder and looked at me before smiling. I rolled my eyes. I'm going to bed. Okay, good night, kiddo. I walked up to my room, I looked at it. It was a bit of a mess and the bloody towel in my laundry basket didn't help either. I picked it up and threw it in the trash bin. I looked at my wall, it smelled like paint. Only one wall had been painted, all the others were still baby pink. Like they had been for the last 15 years of my life. Almost every other piece of furniture in my room was covered with plastic wrap except for my bed. I looked out the window to the night. It was windy, and I could see the branches moving around in craziness. The moon was full and bright. I always found comfort in the moon, just seeing it always relaxed me. I waited in bed until our nightly call. Like every night, I got a call and jumped up to answer it. He was facing away doing laundry on his bed. Hello? He didn't look at me. My dumbass forgot my computer automatically mutes me on my calls. We talked for a while before Marcus joked his mom was going to kick him out if he stayed on call. We said goodnight and hung up. I laid down under my blankets. I stared at the window, humming to myself. A few minutes later, my dad walked into the room. He tucked me into bed, humming my favorite bedtime song, Summertime. I knew I was too old for my dad to tuck me in and sing me to bed, but I always found his voice comforting. He sat brushing my hair from my face. He eventually got up and walked downstairs to join my mom. While I lay there, I stared at the ceiling, thinking. I tried to rationalize everything. It had to be some homeless, and that he was just on drugs or something. I think the worst part of my situation is that I don't have any idea who the arm belonged to. I couldn't see them, but they could see me. At least I think they could. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept getting the feeling I was being watched.